All right, hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. Currently, we are in Acts chapter 20, and we're going to kind of enter into a different phase of Acts or Paul's journey here. And keep in mind, and for the timeline, we're much further on. Could be somewhere, let's say maybe around the 20-year mark, depending on how you date uh, when Paul came to the Lord, when he entered to the ministry. Um, I'm that's kind of beyond me because I haven't done any of the research on that. But he is much, you know, I put it like this. I would say as far as his ministry is concerned, anywhere from 15 to 20 years. And as we're going to see, he's going to purpose to make his way to Jerusalem. And then from there, he will be arrested. And then there's going to be another focus on his ministry in chains. Okay. So let's get to it. Um, Chapter 20. Now he says, after the uproar was over, Paul sent for the disciples, encouraged them, and after saying goodbye, he departed to go to Macedonia. And when he had passed through those areas and exhorted them at length, he came to Greece and stayed 3 months. And when he was about to set sail for Syria, a plot was devised against him by the Jews. So a decision was made to go back through Macedonia, and he was accompanied by Sopater, son of Pygras from Berea, Aratachus, I know I'm butchering these names here, and Secundus from Thessalonica, Gaius from Derbe, Timothy, Titus, and Trophimus from Asia. Now, again, let me just say, I know I just butchered every one of those names. So these are Greek names. So also these, by the way, these are some of the people that you will find throughout Paul's letter when he's naming different people. For example, Titus was the one probably delivered, let's say, the book of Colossians, Ephesians, and of course we all know Timothy. Gaius, interesting story about Gaius, and I think this might be the Gaius, it might be the Gaius that Paul was writing to in the book of Philemon. So verse 5 says, these men went on ahead and waited for us at Troas, but we sailed away from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread. In 5 days we reached them at Troas, where we spent 7 days. Okay. So now you see that we're going through a lot of travel with Paul, which gives you also a reason why it would have been difficult for Paul to be married with this kind of schedule here. Verse 7 says, on the first day of the week, we assembled to break bread. Now, notice this phrase, on the first day of the week. So this would be Sunday. Now, one of the reasons why I'm lingering here is this is why you see why Christians assemble on Sunday as opposed to Saturday. Now, there are churches that do both. There are churches that have, Saturday evening service. But that's more like a Catholic thing, I'm not saying it's either bad or worse. it's almost like, you come to church. It's usually an early Saturday church, five, maybe five, something like that, in the afternoon, and then you kind of get it out of the way. That's my take. But they don't do it because it's the Sabbath day. And that's my point. Now there are discussions, debates whether or not Christians should observe the Sabbath. Okay. Now, as we have seen in the book of Acts, right, there is no such command that for Christians that they have to observe the Sabbath day. Now, the Sabbath day is a Jewish day that was prescribed, that was commanded in the law of Moses. So if you're going to keep the Sabbath according to the law of Moses, that means you cannot do any work, no work. And there were guidelines. You could not cook food, meaning this, you could not, go up and cut up greens or cut up, seasoned chicken, meat or whatever, and cook and fry and all that. That was considered work. What they would do is prepare the food the day before and then eat it on the Sabbath. Okay. But that was, again, under the law of Moses. Now that command was given in honor of God working, the creation, the 6 days of creation, and then it says God rested on the Sabbath day. Now the word rest, now from our perspective, there is a physical aspect to resting. Work 6 days, rest. It's more healthier for you. And again, if you just work nonstop, your body will eventually, you're going to have health problems. Okay. But the idea of rest, as it was designed by God, when it said that God rested, he wasn't making the 6 days, then he whew, done making the earth and the universe. No. The idea of resting, as God was using it, was to sort of enjoy it. So just kind of get this picture. You build your house, okay? Let's say you build your house. You have the skill and you build your house. You do everything. You pour the foundation, frame it, put the roof on it, drywall it, mud, tape it, lay the carpet, put the furniture in, hook up all the electronic gadgets, right? And you get your house where it's now ready to move in. Now, the rest part is when you go in and you enjoy your house. Eat at your brand new, kitchen, marble countertops and all that. And you go in your family room and you watch TV. That's the kind of idea. You're enjoying the fruits of your labor. Now, as I said, because of fallen man, the Sabbath day rest is a healthy, healthy benefit. Now, under the law of Moses, you were commanded. So when Moses first instituted the law, they caught one guy gathering sticks, and they go, "Oh, this guy's gathering sticks," and they end up stoning him under the law. But God did not, as we come over into the New Testament, command. First of all, He didn't command us to keep any part of the law, because again, if you're going to keep the law, if you're going to get circumcised, if you're going to keep the Sabbath, if you're going to keep the feast, then you have to keep all of the law. If you're going to try to say I'm pleasing God, that's the idea. So to keeping the Sabbath day, God is not saying, okay, you can keep the Sabbath day, but forget the rest of the law. That's not how that works. You have to keep all of the law if you're going to fulfill the law. If you're going to be right, if you're going to be just by the law. Now, so when we see in the Christian times, we see the first day of the week that they assembled, that they met on the first of the week, and this was in recognition of the resurrection. So if you go back to the gospel story, Jesus, he is crucified on the preparation day. And so as he is tried before Pilate, and you know that the kangaroo court by the Sanhedrin, they deliver him to Pilate. Well, Pilate then early, if you want to do a timeline, early Friday morning, we're talking real early, they bring Jesus to Pilate. They have the trial, and then Pilate gives the execution order, right? So he goes, and then he is crucified. He hangs on the cross, and before sundown, they remove Jesus' body, lay him into the tomb, seal the tomb, and this was all so that they could rest on the Sabbath. This is where we get the ideal of Good Friday. Okay, Good Friday, which is kind of funny, if you say how good it was. Okay, but anyway, and of course, I don't think anybody. I can tell you, it used to be a holiday, but Good Friday is no longer a holiday. But the idea was that, okay, so Jesus was crucified, and again, I know we can get into the debates, and there are a lot of debates whether or not if Jesus actually was crucified on a Friday, then how can you get 3 days and 3 nights into Friday, Saturday, and Sunday? Which means that Jesus would have to have been crucified around Wednesday. Okay. Well, the simple answer to that is that any part of the day was considered the day in Jewish mind. So that, so again, I've heard the debate. We just won't engage them here. But the idea is that but it was important that Jesus had to have come down on the Sabbath day, which kind of to me blows the theory of the Wednesday crucifixion. Anyway, so they brought him down before, okay, before the sunset on Friday, because that began the Sabbath day. And then from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown, that was the Sabbath day. Now, Jesus rose early the first day of the week. This would have been Sunday. So this began the tradition of why Christian churches meet on Sunday to worship. We see it here, the first day of the week. Now, to be truthful, there is no command as to when you should meet. They met. This is what we see right here. They met, okay, on the first day of the week. So he says, on the first day of the week, we assembled to break bread. And so this was the kind of custom of the early church. The breaking of bread was communion. And then also they would have what's called a love feast, okay? A love feast, meal. Now, if you read 1 Corinthians chapter 11, Paul had rebuked the Corinthian church for how they got into, how they were conducting their love feast, okay? That there were some people that were hungry and there were other people that were eating and no one was sharing their food with the poor. And Paul was like, this is ridiculous. And then you're going to call yourself having communion? Excuse me. But so that's what the idea of the breaking the bread. We see this early tradition of the church, one on the first day of the week or Sunday, and then they would break bread. Then it says, Paul spoke to them, and since he was about to depart the next day, he extended his message until midnight. Understand the what's Paul's thinking here, okay? Remember they traveled, that it was time consuming when they traveled. It was time consuming. So like as Paul is here, um, um, let's see, at Troas. Okay, that's what I thought. It was, anyway, he didn't know when the next time he was going to kind of make his way around there. And so again, so his point was he kind of extended his message until midnight. In other words, it was a long sermon. Now, long sermons could be good if they're good. But there's some preachers that can't preach. I'm sorry. And they're boring. So, but Paul's message was usually, lively. But anyway, except for one guy, he says there was many lamps in the room upstairs where we were assembled. And a young man named Eutychus was sitting in the windowsill and sank into a deep sleep as Paul kept speaking. And when he was overcome by sleep, he fell down from the third story and was picked up dead. Now, kind of interesting. I think we've all been there. How you slept and all of a sudden right? Except this guy was sitting in the windowsill and he fell down and he fell off. And by the way, notice here that where he was, I remember I said that there were wealthy Christians who would open their home, right? There were wealthy, they would open their home. Now, this is necessarily, Paul, it's not saying that it was a home or not, but notice it was 3 stories. So that's kind of a high story right here, if you think about your second floor, and then notice this was 3. And falling from there, it said they took him up dead. But Paul went down, fell on him, embraced him, and said, "Don't be alarmed, for his life is in him." After going, his life in him, after going upstairs, breaking the bread and eating, Paul conversed a considerable time until dawn. Then he left, and they brought the boy home alive and were greatly comforted. Now, how would they know that he was dead? There was a couple of things that could have happened that we do not have the details on, because it wasn't that, like, 1, he probably wasn't breathing. 2, depending on the severity of the fall, he could have broke his neck, hit his head, and of course there was no pulse. And these were all things that they would have looked for as well. Okay. Now I say that because, when people say, well, maybe they just thought he was dead. No, pretty much you could kind of figure out if someone is dead or not. Now this also, just so you know, remember I said that Paul's ministry to the Gentiles was equal to the ministry of the 12 apostles to the Jews. That Peter and them had great prestige among the people because they were known as those who followed Jesus, original disciples of Jesus. There was some fame to that. And oftentimes people would even criticize Paul. You see it in his letters. You see it in Galatians chapters 1 and 2, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, where he's defending his apostleship. Now, I say that because he did the same signs that were performed in Peter, validating him as a true apostle. The same works and miracles were performed in Paul. And here is an example of one. Peter kind of raised the dead. Notice this. Paul raised the dead, validating him as a true apostle of the Lord and also as a true spokesman of the Lord. Okay? So, I know a lot of preachers would like to say, here's a message, excuse me, about not falling asleep. But anyway, all right, guys, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome.